I'm going to take you through the capabilities of MiraCheck. MiraCheck is a checklist ecosystem that allows users to create, edit, share, and discover checklist procedures. It also has a companion mobile app, MiraCheck CoPilot, which allows you to interact with all the great checklist content being created at MiraCheck Cloud. Within the mobile app, you can also directly access MiraCheck Cloud. I have an iPhone here, and I'm going to bring up MiraCheck CoPilot.
Hello, I am your co-pilot Mira. What will you do today?
And we've created a quick start MiraCheck quick start checklist, which walks you through a lot of the capabilities. So I'm going to let MiraCheck take us through the capabilities, and I will interject commentary along the way.
Checklist for MiraCheck Quick Start. MiraCheck CoPilot List. Overview section. MiraCheck CoPilot is a checklist app where Mira, a digital co-pilot, prompts you through a checklist.
So we've thought very hard about how to most efficiently work through procedural content, especially content that you go through time and time again. So you'll see that when it first comes up, it's centered in the screen and it's waiting for you to check an item. Every time you check an item, it brings that next item to that same spot.
Check. The structure of a checklist is a number of lists. For example, pre-flight. Within each list a number of sections. For example, run up, and within each section a number of items. For example, flaps up.
So we've also thought of all the different ways you may want to interact with the checklist. One of them is you're clicking a checkbox. You'll see on the right here we have what's called our check bar, which allows you to also go through the checklist. You can skip, check, and there's a binoculars there. So if you ever get lost in your checklist, you click that binoculars and it immediately takes you back to the currently selected item. And as we go further through this walkthrough, there's many other ways of how you'll actually interact with this checklist. She's talking about the structure of a checklist in this item, and there's multiple structures supported. The most advanced is where you have a number of lists, and then in each list you have a number of sections, and then each section you have a number of items. And we're looking at one of those now. I'm going to go on because she explains it a little more.
Check. The mobile app shows the lists on the bottom as a button scroll bar. When a list is selected, sections display. In each section is a number of items to interact with.
So what she's talking about down here at the bottom is a tab bar with the different lists that can appear in a checklist. And then each list can have a number of sections. This overview is one of the sections. And then in each section you have a number of items.
Check. Each section shows completion with red, not started, yellow, started, and green, completed. On each list button there is a colored bar that shows completion of the entire list.
So she's talking about completion, and there's completion at multiple levels. You'll see down here in the list there's a yellow bar under the list showing that this list is in progress. And then the yellow background on the section title is showing that the section in this section in this list is in progress.
Check. Mira will read the next item to check. You can check or skip an item.
So typically you would go procedurally through and check items, but you can skip ahead at any time, move to any other lists, and start doing things. So I'm going to skip this item.
Skip. If you click directly on a label, she will read the label.
So I clicked directly just on the label of the next item. She skipped that item and then she read that label. If you ever wanted to repeat what she said, you would just click the label again.
Check. She will read an entire section to you by clicking on the section title. This is great for a takeoff or go-around section where you can just listen.
So what she's saying here is the title of the section. You can click this and she'll start reading one by one each item in that section. In aviation, we do a lot of practice and such, and you may be coming down and you have to do a go-around, and you're not going to sit there and check each item. It's a very hectic thing to do. But if you just click that title there, she'll start reading to you, and you can get in your head the procedure that you need to be doing. I'm going to go back to this item that we skipped.
Skip. Mira will read the next item.
Check.
She will read an entire section to you by clicking on the section title. This is great for a takeoff or go around section where you can just listen.
So I went back and I checked the item I skipped, and you may notice she then is smart enough to go ahead and go to that next item that we should be working on.
Check.
If you press and hold on the section title, it will check all items in that section.
So also sometimes, again, during practice and such, you may have cleared a section or a list and you already have done it. So what she's saying here, if you press and hold the section title, it will check all items in that section.
Check.
There is a Talk to Mira function that lets you control the checklist with your voice. After turning it on, you would say check, skip, locate, emergency, read section, check section, and many other commands. To see all commands, press and hold this item. Try it with a Bluetooth headset.
So, as I said, there's multiple ways to interact with the checklist. This is another one where you can talk to Mira and you can use your voice to control the checklist. Later on, it's going to get into a demo of that, so I'm going to just keep moving on.
Check.
You can toggle audio on off from the menu.
So the menu, you'll see there are a bunch of preferences and options here. And by default, we try to start with the basics in more of a beginner mode. And as you get more capability with the app, you can start to explore some of the more advanced capabilities. But right here, I'm just showing in the preferences, you can toggle the audio on and off at any time if you just are in an environment where you're not going to be wanting to listen to her, but you're going to be reading the checklist.
Check.
There is a focused mode which grays out all other items and lets you focus on the present item. Try it now.
So focused mode, you'll see that the one item that we're supposed to be looking at is not disabled, and all the other ones look grayed out. And that is so you can just focus, if you're reading it, on that one item. You can just toggle that off, and you'll see now all the other items are at the same visibility level. I'll turn it on.
Check.
Whenever you start interacting with the checklist, you create a session for the checklist. You can close the checklist, turn off the device, take a call, etc. But once you are in a session, all data will be maintained. Try it now. Go to the menu and select another checklist, and then return to this checklist.
So this is talking about the concept of sessions, and a session isn't just this one time we're in this checklist, but it spans device restarts and calls that you may take and such, where you tell it when you want to clear this checklist and start a brand new session.
Check.
When you want a new session, you select Reset Current Checklist and this will give you a brand new session. Do not try this now. It will clear this current session.
So on the menu, there's multiple options for resetting things. So Reset Current Checklist resets the entire checklist. But again, sometimes you're practicing and you want more granular control, and you can reset just lists or just sections in a checklist.
Check.
You can also reset just a list or a section for more granular control.
Check.
Items can have comments and will have a yellow notes icon in the upper right if they do. Press and hold on the item to show the detailed comments. Press and hold on the item now.
So items, typically in a normal checklist, you would have really more concise items here. This is a learning checklist, so it's providing a lot of content. But typically you'd have more concise items here. But then behind an item, you can have very detailed, rich content. And I'll press and hold to show that. So it slides up a car, and this is basically a web browser in this comments notes field. So you can have very rich content that you'd expect in any like web page as comments. And there's also a notes, which he's going to talk about in a second.
Check.
You can take notes that will be associated with an item. Press and hold and enter some notes now. These notes live with this session of a checklist. When you reset the checklist, they will clear for the next session.
So if you press and hold on any item, you can take personal notes for that particular item. Maybe you're walking around your aircraft and you notice one of the lights is out and you want to take a quick note about that. So each note, you'll get a little blue icon with that item showing you notes, and she's going to tell you about a history feature which you'll be able to recover all of those notes at a later time that you took for this one session of a checklist.
Check.
If you click Show History, you can see every session currently on the device. You can go back to any session to review as well as still interact with previous sessions.
So on the menu, there's this Show History function, and when you look at your checklist now, you see all of the sessions you had with that one checklist. So I'm in my 7th session of the MiraCheck Quick Start, and at any time you can actually just click back on those sessions and you'll basically be right where you left off, and you can actually keep going in a previous session. At the end of the day, you're always typically at the current session, and that's more for historical purposes. I'll turn that back off.
Check.
An item consists of a primary label and an optional secondary label. The secondary label allows you to create a true challenge and response checklist.
So this is going to walk through a detailed simulation of showing you the challenge and response capabilities of MiraCheck.
Check.
There is a challenge response mode that you can turn on in the menu. This is a more advanced feature and by default is off.
So first, challenge and response mode is not turned on, and this will walk you through why.
Check.
When challenge response mode is off, Mira reads the challenge and response.
Check.
When Talk to Mira is off, a secondary voice will say check.
Check.
When Talk to Mira is on, you say check to move on.
So what she just talked about, so we have a few modes here. There's challenge and response mode, and there's talk to Mira if you're actually talking to her or you're just using your finger or thumb to check items. And with challenge and response mode off and talk to Mira off, when you check items, she reads the challenge and the response, and then a secondary voice says check. If you had talk to Mira on, you would actually say check to move on.
Check.
When challenge response mode is on, Mira reads the challenge and waits for a response.
Check.
When Talk to Mira is off, a secondary voice will say the response.
Check.
When Talk to Mira is on, you say the response and she only moves on if you say the correct response.
So back here, if we turn challenge and response mode on, now she is waiting for you to either click the item to say the response, or if Talk to Mira is on, you actually say the response, and only if you say that response do you move on. And this is a more advanced feature. And now here will be a little simulation of those different modes.
Check.
Let's practice the different options.
Check.
First, make sure challenge response mode is off and Talk to Mira is off and check this item.
So we're going to make sure right now challenge and response is off, talk to Mira is off. This is the basic mode. So when we check this,
Check.
Notice how the secondary voice says check.
so you heard the secondary voice say check, and we've been in this mode the whole time, and you've been hearing check the whole time. There's even one more option, that the say check option here, that basically would even not say check, it would just move on to the next item.
Check.
Now, turn on Talk to Mira and say check or check item.
So now I'm going to turn Talk to Mira on and check item.
If she heard you, she should have moved on.
So you see, I said the key word and she moved on.
Now turn challenge response mode on, and Talk to Mira off and check this item to practice on the next item.
So we're going to go back here. We're going to turn Talk to Mira off and challenge response on.
This is the challenge. Check it and you will hear the response.
So in this scenario, since we're not talking to it, we're clicking on the screen, she didn't actually say the response this time. A secondary voice will say it when we check.
This is the response.
Now turn Talk to Mira on. She will wait for you to say move on.
So you heard a secondary voice say this is the response. And again, that's in the mode where you don't talk to Mira. If you put Talk to Mira on, now she's going to wait for us to say the key word. Move on.
That covers the basics. Turn challenge response mode off and Talk to Mira off to continue with the quick start.
So you see I said the word move on, and that was the only word she's listening for to move on in that way. So that goes into a pretty detailed set of capabilities of all the different ways and modes you can author content with MiraCheck. So let's continue with the quick start.
Check.
An item by default has a checkbox, but can be marked as a label only if it is more for informational purposes.
So what she's talking about here is you don't always have to just have checklist content in the items. You can just have informational content.
Check.
This is just some informational content. Maybe you want to display a table of information. Click on the item to move on.
So this is just some informational content, and you can put rich content in here. You can put like a little table like this in here. And when you want to dismiss this item, you basically just click it.
Each label can contain very rich content like rich text, URL links, images, GIFs and videos. Some GIF and a cool video from YouTube. You can click on the video to watch it.
So you can have very rich content within a checklist item as well. In here you're seeing links to a website, you're seeing an animation, and a link to a video. So let's click on the link to the website. And this now went to the MiraCheck homepage, and we're actually going to be at Oshkosh this year, booth 4035B. If you happen to be at Oshkosh flying in or driving in, definitely stop on by, and we can just go back to our checklist. We're back where we were, and there's an animation. We'll show a video as well. So it goes out, in this case, to YouTube, and it's going to play that video. In this recording mode I'm in, it would actually play it right on the phone, but I'm on a desktop app here, so it's playing that video right there. And we go back, and we're right back into our item.
Check.
Items can be mandatory, which means that you can't move forward until you check the mandatory item. This item is mandatory. All items after this are disabled until this is checked.
So this is talking about a feature for mandatory items. There's definitely, in aviation, there can be some very critical items you absolutely never want to miss, and you can mark any items as mandatory, and you'll notice after that, not only are they grayed out, but all the checkboxes are disabled as well. You cannot move forward or check any of these items until you click a mandatory item.
check,
There is a check bar, toolbar, on the right where you can check, skip, locate the selected item and immediately go to an emergency. You can choose the location of the check bar or hide it.
So I clicked on that mandatory item, and when I did that, you'll notice all the other items now became enabled again. Sometimes you would even want that you linearly have to walk through these 5-10 items, and again, you would just mark each one of those mandatory, and it would force you to check one by one through those items. It really can help with some complacency that can happen over time when you use checklists. She's now talking about a check bar, which I mentioned earlier. In this check bar, you have preferences here where you can lay this out on the right, the bottom, the left. We really want it to be customizable to the workflow that best suits you.
check,
There is a big check overlay that turns the entire screen into a big check button. Anywhere you click on the screen will check the current item. If you press and hold the screen, it will skip the current item.
So, as I said, there's multiple ways to interact with this checklist. Another one we have is called the Big Check Overlay. And it is what it kind of says it is. It basically overlays the entire screen with the checkbox button. So no matter where you press on the screen, it's going to check the item. So maybe you're walking around the airplane, it's cold, and you have this in your pocket or something, and you don't want to be having to click on the actual checkbox that you're on.
check,
If you have an Apple Watch, there is a watch app that lets you check and skip from your watch.
So there's also an Apple Watch version which basically puts the check bar controls on the Apple Watch to let you remote control the app. I can't show the Apple Watch right now on my desktop, but I am pulling up my wrist now, and I'm going to click.
check,
There are 3 view modes to choose from: horizontal, vertical, and simple.
So I clicked on the Apple Watch and it went to that next item. So now it's talking about different view modes that we have. I'm going to close the Big Check Overlay by hitting this X. So the different views, horizontal, vertical, and simple.
check,
Horizontal displays sections horizontally. This is a great mode for tablets.
So you're looking at a vertical mode right now, and horizontal mode is the default when you start the app, and it has all the sections where you scroll left to right horizontally. On tablets where there's a lot of real estate, it works really well. Let me pull the tablet one up here to show what that looks like.
Hello, I am your co-pilot Mira. What will you do today?
So now you're looking at the iPad version of MiraCheck.
Checklist for Cessna 182P, November 6472 Golf. Pre-flight list. Initial section. Are you ready to start?
So now you're seeing a true aviation checklist with a lot of content: pre-flight, flight, post-flight, speeds, reference, and emergency. And you'll see horizontally, you can see all the sections there. And if we go to speeds here, you'll see
Speeds list.
we have other views. This is what's called a simple view, which lets you expand and collapse content and quickly just see the content in a more text format than with checkboxes and such. So here's all the speeds for the different operations of my aircraft. And this is great for emergencies as well. If you ever have an emergency list in your tab bar, you'll see on the check bar there's also an emergency button that appears there. So at any time you click that, you're immediately in an emergency, and you're at that top level of what type of emergency am I having, and maybe you're having power loss in flight. You click on that, and you may not check each one of these items, but you immediately have that content there. You actually can select
Maintain speed.
and
Keep
check,
aircraft control.
and check this item
check,
if
Best
you want.
glide. Full gross. 70 knots.
But you typically, in this simple mode, wouldn't use it like that.
Pre-flight list.
So I went back to the beginning.
Skip. Are you ready to start?
And that's showing the iPad version. It works in any horizontal, landscape, or portrait mode. And this gives a good view of the different layouts that we have here. So let me get back to the iPhone version.
Check.
Vertical display sections vertically. This is more ideal for phones.
So this is the mode we are in on this phone, and you don't scroll left to right. The whole checklist is one long vertical scroll.
Check.
Simple display sections in a compact format. Each section in this view is collapsible.
So I showed that on that emergency checklist on that iPad version.
Check.
A list can be set up to display the simple view by default. For example, the emergency and reference sections of aviation checklists typically default to this.
So I showed that as well, where when you're authoring a checklist, you can already set up and say, I want this to default to that simple mode. So when you go to like that emergency section, it's already in that mode.
Check.
On supported Apple tablets, there is also support for slide over multitasking mode. This allows you to slide MiraCheck from the right of the screen on top of your favorite app. Amazing for overlaying on your favorite navigation app like ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot.
So this is a great feature that allows you, when you're using a supported iPad, which I think it's the iPad Mini 2 and above, and then the last few generations of the larger iPads. Let me bring the iPad back up. So with the iPad, say I'm in Garmin Pilot here, and I have a flight I'm taking. I basically can just slide from the right of the screen, and you'll see there's my checklist overlaid on top of Garmin Pilot, and we've completely designed it where it was designed to work in this very narrow, thin view as well. And you can go through all of your procedures, all your checklist content overlaid on top of the app. At any time when you just click, it slides back over, and you just slide again to get it back.
Check.
Weather and density altitude.
Check.
Weight and balance.
Check.
Performance requirements.
So let me show like some comments
Skip.
here.
Weather and density altitude.
There's my detailed comments I have for weather. So let's keep moving on.
Check.
There is a flight timer in the upper right that shows local time as well as Zulu time. You can click on this to get more detail.
So what she's talking about here, we have a flight timer, and for other applications it's just basically a timer. But if you click on it, it basically shows you the current time, the current Zulu or universal time, and it can track elapsed time, so it can replace like your Hobbs meter in your aircraft, because when you check that item that says mags, I'm starting the engine, and then when you return and you are either pulling full rich or shutting down your engine, you can tell that one checklist item to start a timer, another checklist item to stop a timer, and it keeps track of that elapsed time, and all of that logging information shows up in the history of that session of that checklist.
Check.
When you edit a checklist, you can control what items would start and stop the timer, and it can track elapsed time.
Check.
In the aviation world, this is very useful for logging flight time based on when you started the engine and when you shut down.
Check.
Congratulations! This concludes the overview of some of the capabilities of MiraCheck CoPilot. We will now move on to MiraCheck Cloud.
So this concludes this demonstration of the capabilities of the mobile app MiraCheck CoPilot. In the next video, I will walk through all of the great capabilities of MiraCheck Cloud and how we are trying to promote a community to create great checklist content.